The bitter winter wind howled through San Francisco's streets as Mia Sullivan balanced a tray of champagne flutes, weaving through the glittering crowd at the Golden Gate Opera House. Her worn shoes pinched with every step, a harsh reminder of the 25-year-old nursing student's place among the city's elite gathering for tonight's performance. In Box 7, the most luxurious private seating in the Opera House, Victoria Cavalari pressed a hand to her throat, her face flushing an unnatural crimson as she struggled for breath. The elegant 60-year-old woman's diamond necklace caught the light as she slumped against the velvet cushions, her whispered words barely audible. "Tell my son, poison." Mia noticed the older woman's distress while serving the adjacent box, her nursing instincts immediately recognizing the symptoms of thallium poisoning from her toxicology course. Without hesitation, she slipped into Box 7, abandoning her serving duties to check the woman's pulse while scanning for signs that would confirm her suspicion. "Someone call an ambulance," Mia commanded, her voice carrying an authority that belied her position as a mere server in this world of wealth and privilege. The other guests in the box stared blankly, paralyzed by shock, or perhaps unwilling to get involved in whatever was happening. Victoria clutched Mia's wrist with surprising strength, pressing a phone into the young woman's hand with trembling fingers. "Call Stefano," she gasped, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "My son. Tell him I was poisoned. Box 7. Tell him only dimercaprol will work. Time is running out." Mia's fingers trembled as she dialed the number, her mind racing through everything she knew about thallium poisoning and its antidote. The line connected after a single ring, and a deep, controlled voice answered. "Mother, this isn't a good time for—" "Your mother's been poisoned at Box 7 in the Golden Gate Opera House," Mia interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm a nursing student. She's showing signs of thallium poisoning and needs dimercaprol immediately, or she'll die within the hour." Stefano Cavalari's world stopped at the stranger's words, his business meeting forgotten as ice spread through his veins. The 30-year-old man rose from his leather chair, gesturing sharply to the men around him to clear the room as he switched to speakerphone, his voice dangerously calm. "Who are you? And how did you recognize thallium poisoning?" he demanded, already signaling to his driver through the glass partition of his office. His mother's condition was his only concern, but this unknown woman with her precise medical knowledge presented a puzzle he couldn't ignore. Mia's nursing textbooks had never prepared her for the reality of an actual poisoning, much less one involving the mother of a man whose reputation preceded him throughout San Francisco. "I'm Mia Sullivan, second-year nursing student at SF General," she answered quickly, pressing 2 fingers against Victoria's wrist to monitor her weakening pulse. "Stay with her," Stefano commanded, his voice leaving no room for refusal as the sound of a car engine roared to life in the background. "I'll be there in 8 minutes with the antidote. If you're lying about any of this, you won't live to regret it." Mia felt her breath catch at the thinly veiled threat, but she had no time to dwell on fear as Victoria's condition deteriorated rapidly before her eyes. The paramedics would be too slow with standard protocol, and Mia made a split-second decision that would irrevocably change her life's trajectory. "I need ice, alcohol wipes, and any medication she has in her purse," Mia ordered the stunned companions in the box, her voice cutting through their whispered concerns. She had recognized one of the symptoms unique to thallium. The victims often experienced intense internal heat while their extremities grew cold. The opera continued on stage below, the soprano's haunting aria, providing a surreal soundtrack to the life-and-death drama unfolding in Box 7. Mia loosened Victoria's pearl choker and elevated her feet, basic first aid that seemed woefully inadequate against the deadly poison now coursing through the older woman's system. When Stefano Cavalari burst through the door of Box 7 exactly 8 minutes later, the atmosphere changed instantly, as if the air itself recognized the presence of power. His tailored suit couldn't disguise the deadly grace with which he moved, nor could his handsome features mask the dangerous intensity in his eyes. Stefano knelt beside his mother, his face betraying nothing as he assessed her condition with a single glance, before fixing his attention on the young woman in the server's uniform. He produced a small case containing several vials and a syringe, his movements precise and controlled as if he'd done this before. "You're certain it's thallium?" he asked Mia, his voice low enough that only she could hear him as he prepared the antidote. The question held layers of meaning. Was she certain enough to stake her life on this diagnosis? Mia met his gaze without flinching, her chin lifting slightly as she recited the telltale symptoms she had observed. Abdominal pain, peripheral neuropathy, rapidly progressing weakness, the metallic taste she complained of before losing consciousness, and the timing suggests it was in her champagne, which is consistent with thallium's solubility profile. "Hold her still," Stefano instructed, handing Mia the syringe while he cradled his mother's head with unexpected tenderness. Their hands brushed briefly, a fleeting moment of connection that somehow felt significant amidst the chaos surrounding them. Mia administered the dimercaprol with steady hands, her medical training overriding any nervousness she might have felt under Stefano's intense scrutiny. The drug would bind to the heavy metal particles in Victoria's bloodstream, allowing her body to excrete the poison before it could cause permanent damage. Victoria's breathing gradually stabilized as the antidote took effect, color slowly returning to her ashen face while Stefano maintained a protective stance beside her. His eyes, however, never left Mia, studying her with an unreadable expression that made her increasingly aware of how far she'd strayed from her usual world. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out," one of Stefano's men reported from the doorway, his posture deferential but alert, as he scanned the gathering crowd outside Box 7. The opera had ended, and curious onlookers were beginning to notice the commotion. Stefano nodded once, then turned back to Mia with narrowed eyes that seemed to see through her carefully constructed facade of confidence. "You saved my mother's life," he stated matter-of-factly, the words carrying the weight of a debt acknowledged. Sirens wailed outside the opera house as paramedics rushed in with a gurney, their efficient movements creating a buffer between Mia and the intensity of Stefano's presence. She stepped back, suddenly conscious of her wrinkled uniform and the champagne stains on her sleeves. "I should get back to work," Mia murmured, attempting to retreat into anonymity now that professional medical help had arrived. The adrenaline that had carried her through the crisis was beginning to ebb, leaving her lightheaded and uncomfortably aware of her precarious position. Stefano's hand closed around her wrist before she could slip away, his grip firm but not painful as he drew her attention back to him. "Your employment here is terminated," he informed her with quiet authority, ignoring her startled expression as he continued. "You're coming with us to the hospital." "I can't just leave. I need this job," Mia protested, acutely aware of the unpaid bills waiting in her apartment and the tuition payment looming at the end of the month. Her practical concerns sounded trivial, even to her own ears when weighed against a woman's life, but they were her reality. "Your manager has been compensated for your services tonight, with a substantial bonus," Stefano replied, a hint of impatience coloring his tone as the paramedics began moving his mother toward the exit. His eyes flicked meaningfully toward the stage below, where the conductor was taking his final bow. "You didn't save a random socialite tonight," he added in a lower voice, leaning close enough that Mia could detect the subtle scent of expensive cologne beneath the metallic odor of the dimercaprol. "You saved Victoria Cavalari, a name that carries weight in this city for reasons you don't want to understand." The hospital waiting room felt like neutral territory, a sterile environment where the stark differences between Mia's world and Stefano's temporarily faded into the background. She sat across from him, clutching a cup of bitter vending machine coffee that she hadn't tasted, hyper-aware of the two men standing guard near the entrance. "You recognized a poison that most doctors wouldn't identify without extensive tests," Stefano observed, after the silence between them had stretched to uncomfortable lengths. His tone remained conversational, but his eyes were calculating, assessing her with the cool precision of a man accustomed to identifying threats. Mia shifted under his scrutiny, wondering if her quick thinking had placed her in more danger than if she'd simply called 911 and walked away. "I had a professor who specialized in uncommon toxins," she explained, the half-truth slipping easily from her lips. "And this professor taught nursing students to recognize thallium poisoning on sight?" Stefano pressed, his skepticism evident in the slight arch of his eyebrow. He leaned forward, reducing the space between them, as if physical proximity might extract the truth more effectively. Mia dropped her gaze to the linoleum floor, her mind racing to construct a plausible explanation that wouldn't raise more questions. The real story of her obsessive research into poisons after her own mother's suspicious death 3 years ago wasn't something she was prepared to share with this dangerous stranger. "I think the more relevant question is, who would want to poison your mother?" she countered, lifting her eyes to meet his with newfound boldness. If he wanted answers from her, she deserved some in return, especially if those answers might help her understand the situation she'd stumbled into. A flicker of surprise crossed Stefano's face, quickly replaced by something that might have been respect, if not for the dangerous edge underlying it. "Careful, Ms. Sullivan," he warned softly, Curiosity in my world often proves fatal. Is that a threat? Mia asked, her voice steadier than she felt as she set down her untouched coffee. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across Stefano's features, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the vigilance in his posture. Stefano's laugh held no humor, a brief sound that disappeared as quickly as it had emerged. No, that's a fact, he corrected her, checking his watch with deliberate casualness that failed to mask his underlying impatience for news about his mother's condition. The Cavalari family has enemies, he continued after a moment, studying her reaction with unsettling intensity. People who would benefit from my mother's death, or use it as a message meant for me. Mia absorbed this information in silence, the implications settling like ice in her stomach as she processed what he wasn't saying explicitly. The rumors about the Cavalari family's connections to organized crime in San Francisco suddenly felt less like urban legends and more like dangerous truths she couldn't unknow. A doctor appeared at the entrance to the waiting room, his expression carefully neutral as he approached them. Mr. Cavalari, your mother is stable and responding well to treatment, he reported, his eyes flicking briefly, curiously, toward Mia before focusing again on Stefano. The initial intervention was crucial, the doctor continued, his professional tone unable to completely mask his curiosity about the circumstances. Whoever recognized the poison and administered the antidote so quickly almost certainly saved her life. Stefano nodded once, dismissing the doctor with a gesture before turning back to Mia, his expression unreadable as he considered her anew. The tenuous connection formed in crisis had shifted into something more complicated, a debt owed, information shared, and questions raised that neither could easily walk away from. I need to know everything about tonight, he stated rather than asked, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Every person who approached Box 7, every server who handled her food and drink, every detail you noticed before she collapsed. 3 days after the poisoning incident, Mia unlocked the door to her cramped studio apartment in the Mission District, freezing at the sight of Stefano Cavalari seated at her tiny kitchen table. The overhead light cast shadows across his sharp features as he studied her nursing textbooks with casual interest. Most people knock, she managed to say, dropping her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door while mentally cataloging possible escape routes. The contrast between his tailored suit and her secondhand furniture made the room feel even smaller than its already modest dimensions. Security precaution, Stefano replied without apology, gesturing to the empty chair across from him, as if he were the host rather than an intruder. His eyes took in the water stain spreading across her ceiling and the carefully mended curtains with an unreadable expression. Mia remained standing, arms crossed defensively as she waited for an explanation for this invasion of her private space. The thin walls of her apartment suddenly felt inadequate protection against whatever dangerous world had followed Stefano Cavalari to her doorstep. The person who poisoned my mother knows you exist, he stated bluntly, placing a manila folder on the table between them. Your name and address were circulated in certain circles within hours of the incident at the Opera House. Mia felt cold dread settle in her stomach as she finally sank into the chair opposite him, the implications of his words sinking in. Is that supposed to be a threat? Or a warning? She asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. Consider it both, Stefano answered, opening the folder to reveal surveillance photos of Mia leaving her apartment, attending classes, and working at her second job at a 24-hour diner. The timestamps showed they'd been taken over the past 2 days, without her noticing a thing. I won't live in fear because I helped someone, Mia said, pushing the photos away with a decisiveness that belied her inner turmoil. Her life had been precarious enough before getting entangled with whatever dangerous game the Cavalari family was playing. Stefano leaned back in the rickety chair, studying her with newfound interest as he registered her defiance, rather than the expected fear. My family has a compound in Pacific Heights with state-of-the-art security, he said after a moment, his tone making it clear this wasn't merely a suggestion. You expect me to just abandon my life and move in with strangers because of some vague threat? Mia challenged, gesturing around at her small apartment filled with carefully chosen second-hand furniture and medical textbooks purchased with hard-earned money. This may not look like much to you, but it's mine. It won't remain yours for long if you're dead, Stefano countered, his bluntness cutting through her protests. He slid another photo across the table, this one showing a broken lock on her apartment door from earlier that day while she'd been in class. Mia's breath caught as she recognized what the photo represented. Someone had been inside her home today, invading her space just as Stefano had, but with far more sinister intentions. The violation sent a chill down her spine that no amount of righteous indignation could dispel. "Pack whatever you need for 2 weeks," Stefano instructed, rising from the table with the fluid grace of a predator accustomed to having his commands obeyed. His tone left no room for negotiation as he added, "My driver will be waiting downstairs in 20 minutes. Mia stared at him in stunned silence, the realization dawning that her life had fundamentally changed the moment she entered Box 7 at the Golden Gate Opera House. The nursing student who worried about tuition payments and double shifts now had to contend with poisoners and mafia protection. "I have classes, clinicals, my job at the diner. I can't just disappear," she protested, though the argument sounded hollow even to her own ears when weighed against the very real threat to her life. Her carefully constructed path toward financial stability and independence suddenly seemed fragile. The Cavalari estate stood in stark contrast to everything Mia had known, its wrought iron gates opening to reveal manicured gardens, and a mansion of imposing grandeur overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Security cameras tracked their movement as Stefano's car wound up the private driveway, the city lights twinkling below like a separate universe she'd left behind. "This is temporary," Mia reminded herself aloud, as a uniformed staff member appeared to take her single duffel bag, treating the worn canvas with the same deference they might show a designer suitcase. The absurdity of her situation hit her anew with each step into this world of privilege. Stefano watched her reaction with thinly veiled amusement, clearly accustomed to the disorientation visitors experienced upon first encountering the family's wealth. "Victoria is asking for you," he said, guiding her through the marble-floored entryway toward a sweeping staircase that seemed designed to intimidate. Victoria Cavalari's suite occupied the entire east wing of the second floor, its windows offering panoramic views of the bay that would have cost millions on the real estate market. The elegant older woman sat propped against silk pillows, her recovery evident in the healthy color that had returned to her complexion. "My guardian angel arrives at last," Victoria greeted Mia with genuine warmth that seemed at odds with her regal bearing. She extended a hand adorned with a single platinum band, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had so recently been at death's door. Mia found herself drawn to the bedside, her medical training automatically assessing Victoria's vital signs, even as she tried to reconcile this elegant woman with the dying patient from Box 7. "How are your symptoms?" she asked, slipping unconsciously into her clinical persona. "Much improved, thanks to your extraordinary intervention," Victoria replied, her piercing blue eyes, so similar to her son's, studying Mia with undisguised curiosity. "Stefano tells me you're a nursing student with an unusual knowledge of poisons." Mia tensed, aware of Stefano watching the exchange from his position by the doorway, his presence a silent reminder of unanswered questions and growing suspicions. "Just part of my training," she answered carefully, unwilling to reveal how personal her interest in toxicology truly was. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation, and Stefano moved with practiced efficiency to intercept the staff member who entered with an envelope bearing no postmark or return address. The silent exchange and Stefano's immediate tension spoke volumes about the family's ongoing security concerns. "Another warning?" Victoria asked her son with remarkable composure, seemingly unsurprised by the development. Her casual acceptance of danger reinforced Mia's growing understanding that the Cavalari family operated in a world where threats were commonplace rather than extraordinary. Stefano's jaw tightened as he examined the contents of the envelope, his expression darkening before he crossed the room to show his mother while keeping the message hidden from Mia's view. The silent communication between mother and son left Mia feeling distinctly like an outsider, witnessing a private language she couldn't interpret. "It seems our enemies are growing impatient," Victoria observed with the calm detachment of someone discussing weather patterns rather than potential violence. She turned to Mia with renewed interest, adding, "And they're quite curious about you, my dear." Mia felt a chill race down her spine at Victoria's words, suddenly aware that she'd been drawn into something far more dangerous than she'd initially understood. "Why would anyone care about me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper in the opulent room. "Because you prevented a carefully orchestrated assassination," Stefano answered bluntly, pocketing the mysterious message as he approached them. "And because they don't know how you were able to recognize the poison so quickly. A question I'm still considering myself." "I told you it was part of my toxicology training," Mia insisted, the lie feeling hollow even to her own ears. Her fingers unconsciously traced the outline of the locket hidden beneath her sweater, the one containing the only photo of her mother she had left. The black evening gown Mia found laid out on her guest room bed a week later seemed to mock her with its elegance and obvious expense. The handwritten note beside it, in Victoria's refined script, offered no opportunity for refusal. The annual Children's Hospital benefit tonight. Your attendance is expected. I can't accept this, Mia protested when Victoria entered the room minutes later, the older woman's recovery evident in her graceful movements and the healthy flush in her cheeks. The past week of living under the Cavalari roof had done little to diminish Mia's discomfort with their casual displays of wealth. Victoria dismissed Mia's objection with a gentle but firm smile that brooked no argument. Consider it practical rather than extravagant. You'll need appropriate attire to blend in at the gala, where you'll be introduced as my new private nurse and companion. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered with San Francisco's elite, the annual benefit drawing together politicians, tech moguls, and old money families in a display of wealth thinly disguised as philanthropy. Mia felt painfully conspicuous despite the designer gown and professionally styled hair that transformed her external appearance. Remember, you're here as family tonight, Victoria murmured as they entered the event. Her arm linked through Mia's in a gesture that appeared affectionate, but served to guide the younger woman through the unfamiliar social terrain. The implicit protection in the gesture wasn't lost on Mia. Stefano materialized beside them with the silent efficiency that still unnerved Mia after a week in his household, his evening attire accentuating the dangerous elegance that set him apart, even in this gathering of powerful people. His hand settled briefly at the small of her back, ostensibly guiding her but effectively claiming her to the observing crowd. "Play along," he whispered against her ear, as he steered her toward a cluster of men whose expensive suits couldn't disguise their predatory assessments of the room. "These are associates who expect to meet my mother's savior, and possibly her would-be killer." Mia's pulse quickened as understanding dawned. This wasn't merely a social obligation, but a deliberate move in whatever dangerous game the Cavalari family was playing. "You're using me as bait," she accused in a whispered hiss, maintaining her smile for the benefit of watching eyes. "I prefer to think of it as strategic positioning," Stefano countered smoothly, his grip on her waist tightening fractionally as they approached the waiting group. "Watch their reactions when I introduce you. Guilt leaves traces even the most practiced liar can't conceal." The introductions passed in a blur of unfamiliar names and calculating gazes. Mia's nerves stretched to breaking point as she searched for any sign of recognition or hostility among the assembled faces. She found herself leaning into Stefano's solid presence despite her earlier anger, instinctively seeking security in this unfamiliar territory. "May I borrow your lovely companion for a dance?" one of the men asked Stefano after the formalities concluded, his smile not quite reaching eyes that had assessed Mia with uncomfortable intensity throughout the introductions. The predatory edge to his courtesy raised goosebumps along her arms. "I'm afraid Miss Sullivan has promised this dance to me," Stefano replied, with casual authority that concealed the steel beneath his words. Without waiting for a response, he guided Mia toward the dance floor with practiced ease that brooked no opposition. Mia found herself pulled into Stefano's arms as the orchestra began a waltz, his hand splayed possessively across her back as he guided her through steps she'd never learned, but somehow managed to follow under his lead. "That man, August Bianchi, has connections to every criminal enterprise in the city," he informed her, his lips close to her ear under the pretense of intimacy. "Including yours?" Mia challenged, the question slipping out before she could reconsider the wisdom of antagonizing the man currently responsible for her safety. The week spent in the Cavalari household had revealed glimpses of operations that certainly weren't legitimate business ventures. Stefano's laugh held genuine amusement, rather than offense at her boldness. "You're beginning to understand our world, Mia Sullivan," he observed, spinning her gracefully before pulling her closer than strictly necessary for the dance. "Yes, including mine, which is precisely why he's a primary suspect." The morning after the gala, Mia woke to an empty house, the usual bustle of staff notably absent as she made her way through the silent corridors. A single note on the kitchen counter in Stefano's precise handwriting instructed her not to leave the property under any circumstances until his return. Her nursing instincts prickled with unease as she checked Victoria's suite, finding it similarly abandoned with signs of a hasty departure. An open jewelry box, closet doors ajar, and a half-finished cup of tea gone cold on the nightstand. The carefully maintained order of the Cavalari household had been disrupted by something urgent. Mia's phone vibrated with an incoming text from an unknown number. "We have what Cavalari values most. Come alone to Pier 38, Warehouse C. 1 hour. Attached was a photo of Victoria bound to a chair, the timestamp showing it had been taken just 20 minutes ago. Panic clawed at Mia's throat as she tried unsuccessfully to reach Stefano, each unanswered ring increasing her certainty that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The security staff had vanished along with the family, leaving her isolated in the massive house with an impossible decision to make. "This is obviously a trap," she muttered to herself, pacing the marble floors of the entryway while clutching her phone like a lifeline. Yet the image of Victoria, the woman who had welcomed her without question and protected her from unnamed threats, compelled her toward a course of action that defied all logic. 47 minutes later, Mia stood before the weathered exterior of Warehouse C, the sound of lapping waves and distant foghorns creating an eerie soundtrack to what was almost certainly a catastrophic mistake. Her nursing scrubs, the only clothing that felt authentic to her in this situation, offered no protection against the biting wind off the bay, or whatever awaited inside. "Come in, Ms. Sullivan," a voice called from the partially open warehouse door, the casual confidence suggesting they had never doubted her appearance despite the absurdity of their demand. "Victoria Cavalari is quite anxious to see you. She's been most insistent about your special medical knowledge." Mia stepped into the cavernous space, momentarily blinded by the transition from bright morning sunlight to the dim interior illuminated only by dusty windows set high in the walls. The echo of her footsteps on concrete announced her presence more effectively than any introduction. As her eyes adjusted, she made out Victoria seated exactly as shown in the photo, flanked by two men whose expensive suits couldn't disguise their mercenary nature. A third man stood slightly apart, August Bianchi from the gala, his predatory smile now unleashed without the social constraints that had tempered it the previous evening. "You came alone. How touching," Bianchi observed, circling Mia like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Such loyalty to a family you barely know. Or perhaps it's something else drawing you to the Cavalaris." Mia ignored him, focusing instead on Victoria, whose composed expression revealed more strength than fear, despite her compromised position. "Are you hurt?" she asked directly, her medical training automatically assessing the visible signs of the older woman's condition. "Nothing serious, dear," Victoria replied with remarkable dignity, her eyes communicating something Mia couldn't quite interpret. "Though I believe Mr. Bianchi has questions about your remarkable ability to identify poisons, a talent that rather spectacularly ruined his careful plans at the opera." Bianchi's pleasant facade hardened as he grabbed Mia's arm, forcing her attention back to him with bruising pressure. "Indeed, a nursing student who miraculously recognizes thallium poisoning and appears with the perfect antidote seems rather suspicious, doesn't it?" "I don't know what you expect me to say," Mia responded, maintaining a calm she didn't feel as she catalogued potential improvised weapons within reach. The warehouse offered little beyond scattered shipping pallets and rusted equipment that had seen better decades. "The truth would be refreshing," Bianchi suggested with mock pleasantness, nodding to one of his men who produced a syringe filled with amber liquid. "Perhaps this will help clarify your memory, a special compound that loosens tongues quite effectively." Mia recognized the distinctive color of sodium pentothal mixed with a paralytic agent, her specialized knowledge once again revealing itself in the most dangerous possible context. "Truth serum with a neuromuscular blocker," she identified automatically, cursing herself immediately as Bianchi's expression transformed with renewed interest. "Fascinating," he murmured, studying her with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen. "You continue to confirm my suspicions about your unusual expertise, Ms. Sullivan. Expertise that extends well beyond standard nursing curriculum." The warehouse door crashed open before Bianchi could pursue his line of questioning further, the sudden intrusion accompanied by the unmistakable sound of gunfire and breaking glass. Mia dropped instinctively to the floor as chaos erupted around her, years of emergency drills in the hospital providing unexpected preparation for the violence. Stefano appeared through the haze of dust and confusion like an avenging angel, his movements fluid and lethal as he dispatched the nearest guard with terrifying efficiency. His eyes found Mia first, a momentary assessment confirming she remained unharmed before he turned his attention to his mother. The Cavalari family doctor finished examining Mia's bruised wrist, pronouncing her physically unharmed despite the morning's traumatic events. The study where he conducted his examination offered no windows to the outside world, reinforcing the sense of isolation that had characterized her past weeks in this household. "You shouldn't have gone to the warehouse," Stefano stated flatly once they were alone, his earlier concern now replaced by cold anger as he paced the perimeter of the room. The controlled violence she had witnessed hours earlier remained evident in the tightly coiled tension of his movements. Mia lifted her chin defiantly, refusing to apologize for attempting to save his mother when she believed he had abandoned them both. "I made the only choice I could with the information I had," she countered, exhaustion making her voice sharper than intended. "A choice that nearly got you killed," Stefano snapped, halting his pacing to fix her with an intensity that would have intimidated her weeks ago. Now, having seen the lengths to which he would go to protect his family, she found herself strangely unmoved by his display of temper. "Your mother could have died while you were... where exactly?" Mia challenged, rising from her chair to confront him directly. "You disappeared without explanation, leaving us vulnerable while you were handling whatever business is more important than family safety." Stefano's expression shifted at her words, something almost like respect flickering across his features before he mastered it. "I was meeting with the heads of the other families, securing their support against Bianchi's attempted coup," he explained with unexpected candor. "Other families? You mean other criminal organizations?" Mia clarified, no longer pretending ignorance about the nature of the Cavalari enterprise. The weeks spent under their protection had provided ample evidence of activities that existed well outside legal boundaries. Stefano neither confirmed nor denied her assessment, studying her with renewed interest as he considered her directness. "You've shown remarkable adaptability to our world, Mia Sullivan," he observed, using her full name in a way that somehow felt more intimate than casual address would have been. "I've adapted to survive," she corrected him, unwilling to accept his implied approval of her assimilation into their dangerous reality. "But that doesn't mean I belong here, or that I can stay once Victoria no longer needs medical monitoring." Something flashed in Stefano's eyes at her words, disappointment or perhaps challenge, before he closed the distance between them with deliberate steps. "And where exactly do you think you can go that Bianchi won't find you?" he asked, his voice lowered to a dangerous murmur. "He wanted me because of my connection to your family," Mia pointed out logically, refusing to retreat despite his proximity. "Remove that connection, and I become irrelevant to whatever power struggle is happening in your world. Is that what you think happened today?" Stefano asked, genuine curiosity coloring his tone as he studied her with the intensity that still made her heart rate accelerate despite her best efforts at detachment. "That Bianchi targeted you merely as leverage against me?" Confusion flickered across Mia's features as she processed his question, uncertainty replacing her earlier conviction. "Why else would he be interested in a nursing student with no connections or resources?" she asked, genuine bewilderment evident in her voice. "Because you recognized a poison that most medical professionals wouldn't identify without extensive testing," Stefano replied, watching her reaction carefully as he continued. "Because you knew the exact antidote and how to administer it without hesitation or reference materials." Mia felt the blood drain from her face as his implication became clear. Stefano had never stopped investigating her background or questioning her story about toxicology training. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her throat suddenly dry as the conversation ventured into territory she had carefully avoided for 3 years. "I'm suggesting that Bianchi recognized what I suspected from the beginning," Stefano answered, his gaze never leaving her face as he delivered his theory. "Your knowledge of poisons isn't academic, Mia. It's personal, intimate, and born from experience rather than textbooks." The truth Mia had buried beneath layers of careful fabrication threatened to surface under his relentless scrutiny. Memories of her mother's slow, agonizing death at the hands of a stepfather whose patience had finally run out. 3 years of research, of obsessively learning to identify the poisons that had stolen her mother gradually enough to avoid suspicion, all of it exposed by a chance encounter at an opera house. "My mother was poisoned 3 years ago," Mia finally confessed as dawn broke over the San Francisco skyline, the night spent in painful revelations leaving her emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter. "My stepfather administered increasing doses of arsenic over months, making it look like a wasting disease while collecting her life insurance." Stefano remained silent beside her on the terrace, offering the rare gift of undivided attention without judgment as she unburdened herself of secrets long held close. The morning light softened his features, revealing a complexity she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge until now. "I couldn't prove it. The autopsy was inconclusive, and he was careful to dispose of evidence," she continued, her fingers absently tracing the pattern of the locket containing her mother's photo. "So I decided to learn everything I could about poisons, determined that I would recognize the signs if I ever encountered them again. And then, you walked into Box 7 and saved my mother from a similar fate." Stefano observed quietly, the coincidence or destiny of their meeting hanging between them unanswered. He reached for her hand, the gesture tentative in a way that seemed at odds with his usual confidence. Victoria found them still on the terrace an hour later, her keen eyes missing nothing about their linked hands or the emotional intimacy evident in their posture. "I see you've finally stopped circling each other like wary predators," she commented with maternal satisfaction, joining them at the railing overlooking the bay. "Mia has shared her story," Stefano explained simply, the loaded statement conveying volumes about newfound trust that Victoria seemed to understand without further elaboration. The unspoken communication between mother and son reminded Mia painfully of what she had lost. "Then, perhaps it's time we share ours completely," Victoria suggested, her gaze shifting to Mia with unexpected vulnerability. "The Cavalari family has existed in shadows for generations, but shadows can provide cover for transformation as well as concealment." Mia listened in growing amazement as Victoria outlined her long-standing efforts to gradually shift the family's interest toward legitimate enterprises, efforts that had earned her powerful enemies within the old guard, including Bianchi. The poisoning had been as much about stopping this evolution as eliminating a powerful matriarch. "My son has been my reluctant ally in this transformation," Victoria explained with obvious pride, her hand resting briefly on Stefano's shoulder. "Each legitimate business we establish reduces our dependence on the old ways, but change comes slowly in our world." Stefano's expression revealed the complex burden he carried, honor-bound to protect the family legacy, while simultaneously working to transform it into something he could eventually take pride in. His eyes sought Mia's, silently gauging her reaction to this revelation. "The medical foundation we're establishing needs a director with your unique combination of medical knowledge and personal conviction," Victoria continued, watching Mia closely as she presented an opportunity that seemed tailored precisely to bridge the chasm between Mia's world and theirs. "A foundation funded by money from illegal operations?" Mia questioned, unable to ignore the moral complexity despite her attraction to both the offer and the man beside her. Her principles had defined her for too long to be casually discarded, regardless of her growing feelings. "Funded by our legitimate holdings, which now represent 60% of our total assets," Stefano clarified, his business acumen evident in the precise figure. "The foundation itself will be completely transparent, subject to the strictest oversight and compliance standards." Mia considered the proposal, weighing the opportunity to create something meaningful from tragedy against the complicated reality of the Cavalari family's dual existence. "I would need complete autonomy in medical decisions," she stated, surprising herself with the implicit acceptance underlying her conditional response. "Absolutely," Victoria agreed without hesitation, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she watched understanding develop between Mia and her son. "The foundation will focus on identifying and treating victims of poisoning who might otherwise go undiagnosed, cases like your mother's that slip through conventional medical screening." 3 months later, Mia stood in the lobby of the newly established Sullivan Cavalari Medical Research Center, watching as the plaque bearing her mother's name was unveiled to polite applause from San Francisco's elite. The journey from struggling nursing student to foundation director still felt surreal at times, a transformation as profound as the one the Cavalari family was undergoing. Stefano appeared at her side as the ceremony concluded, his hand finding hers with the easy familiarity that had developed between them during the intense months of planning. "Your mother would be proud," he murmured, understanding the bittersweet nature of this triumph better than anyone else could. "Box 7 at the Golden Gate Opera House has been permanently reserved in your name," Stefano added, as they walked toward the reception, the significance of the location where their worlds had collided not lost on either of them. "Victoria insists we use it for the season opening next month. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying these tales of unexpected love and transformation, write in the comments which part of the world you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is what keeps these stories coming.